October 14th, 1942, 0620 hours. Over Iron Bottom Sound, 8,000 feet, Lieutenant Commander Takahashi Sadamu gripped the controls of his Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber, leading 19 aircraft toward Henderson Field. Last night, battleships Kongo and Haruna had fired 918 14-inch shells at the American airfield, the largest naval bombardment in Pacific War history. His orders were simple: photograph the devastation for Tokyo headquarters. Intelligence estimated the runway would be cratered and inoperable for at least 3 weeks, possibly longer. The mission briefing had been categorical. Imperial Navy gunnery officers confirmed 53 direct hits across the runway at dawn. Type 3 incendiary shells, each containing nearly 1,000 phosphorus tubes, had ignited fuel depots and aircraft parked on the field. 5 miles of coconut groves vaporized. The Americans couldn't possibly repair that level of destruction in less than a month. Henderson Field, the thorn in Japan's Guadalcanal campaign, was finally neutralized. Takahashi's bomber formation would document the victory unopposed, perhaps even catch American construction crews still digging through rubble. Banking toward Henderson Field at 0625 hours, Takahashi saw the smoke columns rising from burning fuel dumps, exactly as predicted. Then, propeller glints, catching the sunrise. His blood went cold. American F4F Wildcat fighters, climbing fast from a runway his commanders had sworn would be closed for weeks. Impossible. How? Lieutenant Commander Takahashi's impossible sighting on October 14th represented the culmination of a strategic gamble that began 2 months earlier, 8,000 miles from the American mainland, on an island most Americans had never heard of. Henderson Field wasn't just an airstrip, it was the most isolated, most critical, and most vulnerable piece of real estate in the Pacific War. Its survival would determine whether the United States could mount its first offensive against Imperial Japan, or whether American forces would be driven back into the ocean. August 7th, 1942. U.S. Marines of the 1st Marine Division stormed ashore at Guadalcanal's northern coast, targeting a nearly complete Japanese airfield that intelligence had identified as a strategic threat. Japanese construction crews fled into the jungle, leaving behind a 3,600-foot dirt runway, support buildings, and construction equipment. The Marines renamed it Henderson Field after Major Lofton Henderson, a Marine aviator killed at the Battle of Midway. Within hours, American commanders recognized what they'd captured: the only Allied airfield within 1,000 miles capable of supporting offensive air operations. Control Henderson Field, control the Solomon Islands. Lose Henderson Field, lose Guadalcanal, and potentially the entire South Pacific campaign. The strategic mathematics were brutal. Henderson Field sat 8,000 miles from San Francisco, at the absolute limit of American supply lines. 30,000 Japanese troops occupied Guadalcanal, outnumbering the Marine garrison. Enemy forces controlled the jungle terrain within 150 feet of the airfield perimeter. Japanese destroyers and cruisers operated freely at night, running supplies and reinforcements in high-speed missions the Americans called the Tokyo Express, and shelling Henderson Field with impunity. Japanese bombers from Rabaul, 560 miles northwest, could strike the airfield almost daily. Every dawn brought the possibility of destruction. Every night brought the certainty of bombardment. Yet Henderson Field represented something unprecedented: an unsinkable aircraft carrier. If American engineers could keep the runway operational despite continuous enemy attack, aircraft based there could interdict Japanese supply lines, support Marine ground operations, and establish air superiority over the Solomons. The entire Guadalcanal campaign, America's first offensive operation of the Pacific War, hinged on a single dirt airstrip surrounded by enemy forces. Lose the airfield, evacuate the island. The strategic stakes couldn't be higher. September 1st, 1942. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion stepped off landing craft onto Guadalcanal's beach. 387 men, 5 officers. Led by Lieutenant Commander Joseph P. Blunden, Civil Engineer Corps, U.S. Naval Reserve. Their mission, maintain Henderson Field and construct auxiliary airstrips under continuous enemy bombardment. No reinforcements available. No margin for error. Build while under attack or watch American air power die on the vine. The Seabees, derived from the initials CB for Construction Battalion, were about to face the ultimate test of their We Build, We Fight motto. Major Marion Carl, a Marine fighter ace operating from Henderson Field, later described the conditions with dark humor, the only place on Earth you could stand up to your knees in mud and still get dust in your eyes. Tropical downpours transformed the runway into a quagmire. Within hours, the equatorial sun baked the surface into choking dust clouds. Malaria and dysentery ravaged personnel. Japanese snipers fired from the tree line. Nightly naval bombardments cratered the runway with mathematical regularity. Daily air raids forced construction crews into foxholes, watching precious work hours evaporate under falling bombs. The 6th NCB got to work immediately. By September 9th, just 8 days after arrival, they completed Fighter 1, an auxiliary 2,600-foot grass strip carved from what pilots called the cow pasture, located 1,800 feet east of Henderson Field. The auxiliary strip provided backup capacity if the main runway was hit, dispersed aircraft to reduce bomb damage, and doubled operational tempo. But Fighter 1 was just the beginning. The real challenge was Henderson Field itself, keeping the main runway operational despite escalating Japanese attacks designed specifically to crater it beyond repair. September 2nd, 1942. The first major Japanese bombardment hit Henderson Field, gouging craters across the runway. Marines and pilots expected days of downtime, the conventional wisdom for repairing heavy runway damage. Combat aircraft sat idle. Air superiority hung in the balance. Japanese commanders anticipated at least 48 hours before American planes could fly again. The Seabees had different plans. What happened next would change Japanese strategy, validate American innovation, and prove that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't firepower, it's the ability to absorb damage and keep fighting. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion was about to introduce Imperial Japan to a technological revolution that would render obsolete every assumption about airfield vulnerability. The Japanese expected weeks of repair time. They were about to discover the impossible 40 minutes. The crater measured 15 feet across and 4 feet deep, a perfect circle gouged by a Japanese 140mm naval shell on September 2nd, 1942. Time 0.5s. Conventional military engineering doctrine called for 48 to 72 hours to repair such damage, excavate debris, haul fill material, compact the surface, allow settling time, resurface with gravel or concrete. Henderson Field should have been closed for at least 2 days. Instead, Lieutenant Commander Blunden's Seabees had the runway operational in 42 minutes. The secret wasn't working faster, it was working smarter, using a technology the Japanese didn't know existed and couldn't counter, Marston Mat. Marston Mat, officially designated pierced steel planking, or PSP, represented one of World War II's most significant yet least celebrated innovations. Developed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at the Waterways Experiment Station in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and tested at Marston, North Carolina in late 1941, each steel plank measured 10 feet long by 15 inches wide by 1/4 inch thick. The perforated design, rows of punched holes running the length of each plank, reduced weight to 66 pounds per section while maintaining load-bearing strength sufficient for fully loaded bombers. Interlocking edges allowed 2-man teams to connect planks with simple hand tools, creating instant runway surface over any terrain. The perforations facilitated drainage in tropical downpours and prevented hydroplaning. On Pacific Islands, Seabees laid the matting directly over crushed coral, creating runways in days that would have required months using conventional concrete construction. But mast and mat alone didn't explain the 40-minute miracle. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion had developed something unprecedented, a pre-positioned rapid repair system that transformed runway maintenance from construction project into combat operation. Lieutenant Commander Blunden positioned dump trucks loaded with crushed coral gravel at strategic points around Henderson Field, analyzing prevailing wind patterns and Japanese bombing approaches to predict likely impact zones. Bulldozers stood ready with engines warm. Stockpiles of mast and mat sections sat dispersed in protected revetments, close enough for rapid deployment but spread out to prevent a single bomb strike from destroying all reserve materials. Specialized repair crews received sector assignments. Each team knew exactly which craters they'd fill, which equipment they'd use, which mat stockpile they'd draw from. The choreography was brutal in its efficiency. The moment Japanese bombers departed and the all-clear sounded, bulldozers rolled toward fresh craters. Dump trucks positioned at crater edges, dumping coral gravel directly into the hole while bulldozers simultaneously pushed and spread the fill. Compactors followed immediately, packing the gravel to prevent settling. Before the coral dust settled, mast and mat teams arrived, 2 men per plank, hand tools clanking, laying interlocking steel sections across the freshly compacted surface. 10-foot sections connected with practiced speed, position, align, lock, move to next. 66 pounds of perforated steel transforming bomb crater into load-bearing runway surface in minutes. No concrete mixing, no curing time, no settling period. Fill, compact, surface, operational. Builder First Class Tony Lent, decades later, would capture the essence of the Seabee innovation. Theoretical knowledge will only take you so far, but actually utilizing the tools, materials, and skills required to be successful will make a world of difference when a real emergency arises. Henderson Field was the ultimate emergency, arising multiple times daily. The 6th NCB wasn't just building. They were inventing combat engineering doctrine in real time, under fire, with no margin for error. By September 9th, just 8 days after landing, the battalion completed Fighter 1, the auxiliary 2,600-foot grass strip that pilots nicknamed the cow pasture. The auxiliary field provided critical redundancy. If Henderson Field took heavy damage, aircraft could operate from Fighter 1. If Fighter 1 was hit, Henderson Field remained operational. Japanese bombers faced an impossible dilemma: crater both runways simultaneously or watch American fighters launch from whichever strip survived. The redundancy multiplied repair effectiveness. Seabees only needed to restore one runway to maintain air operations, dramatically reducing pressure and repair time. The system's true genius lay in its scalability. Small damage, 1 or 2 craters, required minimal response. A single bulldozer, 1 dump truck, a 4-man mast and mat team. 40 minutes, tops. Moderate damage, 5 to 10 craters, scaled proportionally, multiple teams working simultaneously on different sections. Still under an hour. Even catastrophic damage could be triaged. Fill the craters that blocked aircraft movement, lay temporary mat surfaces to create minimum operational strips, conduct full repairs after aircraft launched. Time 0.5, then the Japanese couldn't comprehend it. Their reconnaissance flights photographed extensive crater damage at dusk, then returned at dawn to find fully operational runways. Intelligence reports to Tokyo described impossible repair speeds. Japanese commanders suspected the Americans had somehow hidden backup runways or deployed massive construction forces. The truth was simpler and more devastating: 66-pound steel planks and smarter logistics. As September progressed into October, the 6th Naval Construction Battalion expanded to 1,002 men and 17 officers. Reinforcements recognizing Henderson Field's criticality? They faced 187 air raid alerts and survived 68 direct attacks during their tenure. Japanese bombing frequency increased, bombardment intensity escalated, but the Marston-Mat system held. Every repair validated the doctrine. Every repaired runway launched fighters that intercepted Japanese bombers, creating a virtuous cycle. Faster repairs meant more operational aircraft, more aircraft meant fewer successful Japanese bombing runs, fewer successful runs meant less damage requiring repair. The first casualties came during these intensifying attacks. Chief Machinist Mate Henry L. Thompson would become the 6th Seabees first killed in action on October 13, 1942, dying while maintaining the system that kept Henderson Field alive. The Seabees were discovering the second part of their motto, "We build, we fight." Building under fire meant fighting. Fighting meant dying. But it also meant winning. September gave way to October. Japanese frustration mounted. Destroyer bombardments failed. Cruiser bombardments failed. Daily air raids failed. American fighters kept launching from runways that should have been cratered into uselessness. Tokyo received increasingly desperate field reports. Enemy employs unknown runway repair technology. Standard bombing ineffective. Recommend maximum firepower concentration. The Imperial Navy prepared its ultimate response. If destroyers and cruisers couldn't close Henderson Field, battleships would. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion's Marston-Mat system was about to face the largest naval bombardment of the Pacific War. 40 minutes wouldn't be enough, it would need to be impossible. Timed 0.5, the Seabees' 40-minute repairs at Henderson Field weren't just tactical innovation. They were the visible manifestation of a strategic reality the Japanese High Command had catastrophically misjudged. Behind every coral-filled crater, behind every Marston-Mat section, stood an industrial colossus that Imperial Japan simply could not match. The mathematics were brutal, unforgiving, and mathematically certain. America could absorb losses and maintain operational tempo at rates that would bleed Japan's military to exhaustion. Henderson Field's continuous operation multiplied this advantage into strategic dominance. In 1942, American factories produced 47,836 military aircraft. Japanese factories produced 8,861. The disparity, 5.4 to 1 in America's favor, represented more than numbers on production charts. It meant that for every Japanese aircraft destroyed over Henderson Field, America could replace it 5 times over before Japan replaced its single loss. Every F4F Wildcat shot down over Guadalcanal could be replaced within weeks via the supply chain stretching back to Grumman's factory in Bethpage, New York. Every A6M0 lost in combat represented an irreplaceable hole in Japanese fighter strength. The United States produced more military aircraft in 1942 alone than Japan would manufacture during the entire war. Henderson Field's survival transformed this production disparity into operational annihilation. American aircraft launching from repaired runways to destroy Japanese aircraft that couldn't be replaced. The mathematical certainty extended beyond airframes to what powered them. American aviation gasoline carried octane ratings of 100/130, a measure of fuel's resistance to detonation under compression. Japanese aviation fuel peaked at 87/91 octane. The 14-point octane advantage delivered 10 to 20% more engine power at critical moments, higher altitude performance, sustained combat speeds, greater acceleration in dogfights. The Grumman F4F Wildcats 1200 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R1830 twin Wasp radial engine drinking 100 octane fuel could maintain full combat power for extended periods. The Mitsubishi A6M0's 940 horsepower Nakajima Sakai engine, optimized for lower octane fuel, suffered performance degradation at full throttle. Japanese pilots couldn't match American combat speeds without risking engine damage from fuel detonation. The chemical advantage was invisible but decisive. American fighters could literally outperform Japanese aircraft through superior petroleum engineering. The aircraft themselves told the disparities story. The F4F Wildcat, America's frontline carrier fighter in 1942, achieved 331 miles per hour maximum speed with an 845-mile combat radius. 6 wing-mounted .50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, firing 4,800 rounds per minute total, 80 rounds per second of armor-piercing destruction. Self-sealing fuel tanks and pilot armor plate sacrifice speed for survivability. American doctrine accepted the trade, bring the pilot home, they'll fly again tomorrow. Standing in contrast, the A6M0, 332 miles per hour maximum speed, 1,162-mile combat radius, magnificent maneuverability purchased through elimination of pilot protection and fuel tank armor. Japanese doctrine prioritized aircraft performance over pilot survival. Early war this worked. Experienced pilots exploited the Zero's agility advantage. By October 1942, American tactics had adapted. 4F pilots avoided turning dogfights, instead using diving attacks that exploited the Wildcat's superior diving speed and structural strength. American pilots survived losses, Japanese pilots increasingly didn't. The bomber disparity was equally stark. The Mitsubishi G4M Betty, Japan's primary medium bomber attacking Henderson Field from Rabaul, cruised at 266 miles per hour with a 3,749-mile maximum range. Impressive operational radius, but purchased through fatal compromise, minimal armor protection, unprotected fuel tanks, structural vulnerability. Allied pilots called it the flying lighter because it ignited when hit. The Betty carried just 1,764 pounds of bombs maximum, barely half the payload of American medium bombers. Every raid from Rabaul risked irreplaceable aircraft and crews for minimal bomb tonnage. Henderson Field's rapid repairs meant Japanese bombers needed multiple successful raids to achieve lasting damage, multiplying exposure to American fighters. The attrition mathematics favored the defender overwhelmingly. Japanese strategic planners understood the production gap by late 1942. Time tubbed 0.5s. Intelligence reports arriving at Imperial General Headquarters detailed American industrial mobilization, factories converting from automobile production to aircraft manufacturing, shipyards launching escort carriers at impossible rates, training facilities graduating pilots with hundreds of flight hours. The reports were mathematically precise and strategically terrifying. Japan's industrial capacity, stretched across China, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific, couldn't expand fast enough to match American output. Every month the war continued, widened the gap. Every operational American airfield, especially Henderson Field, accelerated the attrition rate beyond Japanese replacement capacity. Pharmacist's mate First Class Louis Ortega, serving with the 1st Marine Division at Henderson Field, witnessed the strategic mathematics translated into tactical reality. Surviving both daily air raids and nightly naval bombardments, he understood what Japanese pilots faced. You can get a dozen air raids a day, but they come and they're gone. A battleship can sit there for hour after hour and throw 14-inch shells. I will never forget those 4 hours. His words foreshadowed what was coming. The escalation from air raids and destroyer bombardments to the ultimate firepower commitment. But his observation captured the central strategic truth: Japanese attacks came and went. Henderson Field remained. American production ensured aircraft would keep launching no matter how many raids succeeded. The Seabees' 40-minute repairs multiplied that certainty into operational invincibility. By early October 1942, Japanese commanders faced mathematical certainty disguised as tactical problem. Every day Henderson Field remained operational. American aircraft interdicted Tokyo Express supply runs, attacked Japanese positions, and destroyed irreplaceable bombers attempting to crater the runway. Every night's bombardment, whether by destroyers, cruisers, or eventually battleships, would be repaired within hours. The production mathematics meant Japan couldn't win an attrition battle. The repair mathematics meant Japan couldn't close Henderson Field through conventional bombardment. Tokyo faced the strategic impossibility that all great powers eventually encounter. The mathematics of industrial war don't care about courage, training, or tactical skill. Numbers win. Production wins. America had both. The solution from Tokyo's increasingly desperate perspective was overwhelming firepower, bombardment so catastrophic that even 40-minute repair systems couldn't respond. Destroyers failed. Cruisers failed. The next escalation was inevitable: battleships. On October 13th, 1942, the Imperial Japanese Navy committed the largest naval bombardment of the Pacific War against a single target. The mathematics would be tested to destruction, literally. 40 minutes wouldn't be enough. The Seabees would need to make the impossible routine one more time, at maximum scale, or watch Guadalcanal fall and validate every Japanese strategic calculation. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion was about to discover whether American industrial superiority and tactical innovation could survive Japan's ultimate firepower. October 13th, 1942, 01:33 hours. The sound reached Henderson Field before the visual confirmation, a deep rolling thunder entirely different from destroyer guns or air-dropped bombs. Seabees in their dugouts recognized it immediately: heavy naval rifles. Very heavy. Pharmacist's mate first class, Louis Ortega, sheltering with Marines near the airfield perimeter, heard the first shell's distinctive freight train shriek seconds before impact. Then the world exploded. Battleships Kongo and Haruna had entered Iron Bottom Sound, carrying 918 14-inch high-explosive shells with a singular mission: obliterate Henderson Field so completely that not even the Seabees' 40-minute miracle could save it. The bombardment that followed represented the Imperial Japanese Navy's ultimate commitment, the largest single naval bombardment of the entire Pacific War, concentrated on 1 square mile of tropical airfield. Kongo and Haruna, Kongo-class fast battleships displacing 31,980 tons each, had sailed from Truk specifically for this mission. Their 14-inch main batteries, 8 guns per ship, 16 total, could hurl 1,485-pound high-explosive shells 22 miles with devastating accuracy. But accuracy wasn't the goal tonight. Saturation was. Naval gunfire officers loaded Type 3 Sanshiki incendiary shells alongside high-explosive rounds, each incendiary shell containing 480 to 996 phosphorus-filled tubes designed to ignite fuel, ammunition, and wooden structures. The plan was methodical: annihilation, crater the runway beyond repair, ignite fuel depots, destroy parked aircraft, kill construction personnel in their shelters, render Henderson Field inoperable for weeks. For 4 hours, the battleships fired systematically across Henderson Field's grid coordinates. 14-inch shells arrived every 20 to 30 seconds, enough interval to reload, aim, fire again. Each impact created craters 15 to 20 feet across and 6 to 8 feet deep, hurling coral fragments hundreds of feet. High-explosive shells detonated on contact, their blast waves flattening anything within 50 feet. Incendiary shells burst in mid-air, raining white phosphorus fire across fuel dumps and aircraft revetments. Aviation gasoline ignited instantly, towering orange fireballs visible for miles. Aircraft caught in the open burned to skeletal frameworks. Coconut trees vaporized. 5 miles of palm groves simply ceased to exist, reduced to smoking stumps and ash. Ortega's account captured the psychological weight. For the next 4 hours, we were bombarded by 4 battleships and 2 cruisers. Let me tell you something. You can get a dozen air raids a day, but they come and they're gone. A battleship can sit there for hour after hour and throw 14-inch shells. I will never forget those 4 hours. The next morning when they stopped shelling, there was a haze over the whole area. 5 miles of coconut groves were gone. His words understated the terror, sheltering in dugouts while the earth heaved, watching timber ceilings splinter from near misses, knowing that any shell landing within 30 feet meant instant death. Air raids lasted minutes. Battleship bombardments lasted hours. The psychological difference was profound. Chief Machinist Mate Henry L. Thompson died during this bombardment, the 6th Naval Construction Battalion's first killed in action. The 42-year-old machinist from Pennsylvania had maintained the battalion's heavy equipment since September 1st, keeping bulldozers, dump trucks, and compactors operational under daily air raids. A near miss collapsed his dugout, killing him instantly. His death underscored the reality that we build, we fight meant fighting and dying alongside combat Marines. The Seabees weren't rear echelon construction workers. They were frontline engineers maintaining strategic infrastructure under direct enemy fire. Thompson's sacrifice would be honored in the Presidential Unit citation the battalion would receive, but on October 13th, his death simply meant one less experienced equipment operator for the repairs that dawn would demand. At 0530 hours, Kongo and Haruna ceased fire and withdrew north through Iron Bottom Sound. 918 14-inch shells had struck Henderson Field and surrounding areas. Ammunition expenditure exceeded every previous bombardment combined. Tokyo received reports of complete destruction confirmed by observation. Japanese commanders expected Henderson Field closed for 3 to 4 weeks minimum, perhaps permanently if follow-up air raids prevented repair efforts. Ground forces preparing for renewed offensive operations received orders to advance, counting on American air support being neutralized. Japanese bomber crews at Rabaul loaded photographic equipment for reconnaissance flights to document the devastation. Lieutenant Commander Takahashi Sadamu, preparing his G4M Betty bomber for the morning mission, reviewed the intelligence brief with satisfaction. 53 confirmed runway craters, fuel depots destroyed, aircraft losses estimated at 40 plus. Henderson Field was finished. The Seabees emerged from their dugouts at 0545 hours, 15 minutes after the bombardment ceased. The scene matched every worst-case scenario they'd prepared for, and exceeded several. 53 craters pocked the runway, some overlapping, creating elongated gouges 25 feet long. The main fuel depot burned uncontrollably, sending black smoke thousands of feet skyward. Aircraft lay twisted and burning in their revetments. The coconut grove that had provided shade and camouflage simply didn't exist anymore, replaced by a lunar landscape of splintered stumps and smoking earth. A haze of coral dust and smoke reduced visibility to a few hundred yards. Fighter 1 auxiliary strip had taken multiple hits as well, though less severely. The devastation was comprehensive, methodical, and seemingly terminal. Lieutenant Commander Blunden conducted rapid damage assessment, while Seabees began rolling bulldozers toward pre-assigned sectors. The assessment was mathematically precise, 53 craters requiring fill, approximately 2,400 cubic yards of coral gravel needed, 180 Marston mat sections to surface the repairs. Equipment status, 7 bulldozers operational, 11 dump, trucks functional, 3 compactors available. Personnel, 1,002 men, minus Thompson, and 3 wounded, minus crews fighting fires. Time available, Japanese reconnaissance flights would arrive within 90 minutes, 0715 hours at latest. Bombers would follow by 0800 hours. American fighters needed a minimum 2,800-foot operational strip to launch. Mathematics, logistics, and time pressure. The 40-minute system faced its ultimate test. The Japanese had calculated that even the impossible American repair capabilities couldn't respond to battleship-scale devastation. Tokyo's planners had analyzed previous repair times, 40 to 60 minutes for destroyer or cruiser damage, involving 5 to 10 craters maximum. 53 craters represented 10 times the previous maximum workload. Linear scaling suggested 8 to 10 hours minimum repair time, well past dawn, past reconnaissance flights, past the bomber strikes that would catch repair crews exposed on the runway surface. The mathematics favored Japan definitively. But the Japanese calculations contained a fatal flaw. They assumed linear scaling. The Seabees system was designed for parallel operations. 53 craters didn't mean 53 sequential repairs. It meant 53 simultaneous repairs using pre-positioned equipment, dispersed stockpiles, and sector-assigned crews. The system's genius was scalability through redundancy. More damage didn't require more time. It required more teams working simultaneously. And Lieutenant Commander Blunden had 1,002 men who'd practiced exactly this scenario for 6 weeks. The pre-positioned dump trucks rolled first, engines already warm, drivers at their stations, coral gravel loads ready. Bulldozers followed, their operators navigating by instinct through smoke and dust. Mast and mat teams assembled at dispersed stockpiles, pulling steel sections onto handcarts for rapid deployment. Compactor crews started engines, checking equipment. Firefighting teams worked separate. Saving the fuel depot was hopeless, but containing the fires to prevent spread was achievable. Medical personnel established triage stations. Communications teams prepared to guide incoming fighters once, if, the runway became operational. October 14th, 05:45 hours. 53 craters. Japanese bombers inbound. Dawn in 45 minutes. Lieutenant Commander Blunden gave the order, fill them. 1,000 Seabees attacked Henderson Field's destruction with the desperation of men who understood that failure meant not just tactical defeat but strategic collapse. Guadalcanal hinged on the next hour. The 40-minute miracle needed to become a 53-crater impossibility. Mathematics, determination, and Marston Mat against the Imperial Japanese Navy's ultimate firepower. The real battle was just beginning. October 14th, 1942, 05:45 hours. 7 bulldozers rolled simultaneously toward 53 craters spread across Henderson Field's runway. Behind each bulldozer came dump trucks loaded with crushed coral gravel, their engines roaring in coordinated symphony. Compactor operators waited at staging positions, watching sector assignments. Marston Mat teams assembled beside dispersed stockpiles, counting sections, checking hand tools, preparing for the sprint across open runway once craters were filled. The choreography was precise. Each man knew his role, his sector, his equipment. But nobody had practiced this at scale. 53 craters. 90 minutes until Japanese reconnaissance aircraft. The mathematics were impossible. Lieutenant Commander Blunden gave the execution order anyway. Bulldozer operators attacked the largest craters first, strategic triage prioritizing damage blocking potential takeoff runs. The machines pushed coral debris from crater edges back into the holes, while dump trucks positioned overhead, tilting beds to pour gravel directly into the excavations. The technique was brutally efficient, no hauling, no intermediate staging, no wasted movement. Coral gravel cascaded into craters in continuous streams, while bulldozers spread and leveled simultaneously. The first crater, 18 feet across, 7 feet deep, took 12 minutes from initial bulldozer contact to compacted surface ready for matting. 12 minutes, not 40. The parallel operations were working. Sector teams operated independently, attacking assigned craters without central coordination. The pre-position system's genius revealed itself under maximum stress. Each team functioned as autonomous repair unit, drawing from local stockpiles, using pre-assigned equipment, operating within known geographic boundaries. No bottlenecks. No competition for resources. 53 craters didn't create 53 sequential tasks. They created 17 simultaneous 3-crater repairs. The mathematics shifted from impossible to merely improbable. Compactor crews followed bulldozers by minutes, packing freshly dumped gravel to prevent settling under aircraft weight. The compactors towed vibrating drums weighing several tons, required multiple passes across each filled crater, their rhythmic pounding creating seismic tremors that added to the smoke-obscured chaos. Speed warred with thoroughness, insufficient compaction meant crater collapse under landing gear loads, but excessive compaction consumed irreplaceable time. Operators split the difference, 3 passes per crater instead of the doctrinal 5, gambling that reduced compaction would hold long enough to launch fighters. The runway didn't need to be perfect. It needed to be functional for 90 minutes. Mast and mat teams moved the instant compactors cleared sectors. 2-man teams carried 66-pound steel sections at sprint pace across the runway, laying planks in overlapping patterns across freshly compacted gravel. The perforated steel, locked together with mechanical simplicity, align interlocking edges, stomp the joint with boot heels, move to next section. 10 feet of runway surface per plank. 18 planks per large crater. 3 minutes per crater if teams worked without pause. The math was tight but achievable. At 06:15 hours, 30 minutes into repairs, Marines at the perimeter reported engine sounds from the north. Japanese reconnaissance flights launching from Rabaul, arriving earlier than predicted. 60 minutes until visual contact. The Seabees working exposed on the runway had no cover. If Japanese pilots decided to strafe, repair crews would be slaughtered. Lieutenant Commander Blunden calculated options: pull crews to shelter, lose 40 minutes of work, guarantee failure, or continue working, risk casualties, maintain possibility of success. The decision required seconds. "Keep working," he ordered. 1,000 men stayed on the runway. The smoke from burning fuel depots provided accidental concealment. The haze that pharmacist's mate Ortega described had reduced visibility to 100-yard ranges. Japanese reconnaissance pilots approaching at altitude would see smoke columns, not the organized chaos beneath. The environmental devastation that Tokyo expected would prove Henderson Field's destruction, instead masked its resurrection. American meteorological luck, rare in the Guadalcanal campaign, had arrived at the critical moment. By 06:35 hours, 50 minutes into repairs, 37 craters were filled, compacted, and matted. 16 remained. But those 37 craters created enough continuous runway surface for emergency operations. The mathematics of aircraft takeoff requirements became relevant. F4F Wildcats needed 1,400 feet of runway for combat load takeoff. Henderson Field's main runway stretched 3,600 feet. 37 repaired craters, strategically distributed, created multiple 1,600-foot segments. Not ideal, barely adequate, but functional. Marine aviators from Fighter Squadron 121 and Marine Scout Bombing Squadron 141, the pilots who'd watched their aircraft burn during the night's bombardment, assembled near the surviving fighters. 12 F4F Wildcats remained flyable, hidden in dispersed revetments away from the main destruction. Their pilots had spent the night cataloging damage, salvaging parts, fueling aircraft from emergency reserves, hand-pumped from buried drums. They'd expected to wait days before flying again. Now Seabees were signaling readiness for emergency launches. The pilots didn't question, they manned aircraft. 06:45 hours. First F4F Wildcat engine start. The Pratt & Whitney R-1830 radial coughed, caught, roared to full power, 1,400 horses of American engineering proving operational despite the night's devastation. A second engine started. Third. Fourth. By 06:50 hours, 12 Wildcats sat at makeshift staging areas along freshly matted runway sections, pilots running pre-flight checks, waiting for clearance. 06:55 hours. Japanese reconnaissance formation, 3G-4M Betty bombers with photographic equipment, approached from the northwest at 10,000 feet. Lieutenant Commander Takahashi Sadamu led the formation, anticipating unopposed photo runs over destroyed Henderson Field. Intelligence had confirmed catastrophic damage, 53 craters, fuel depots, ablaze, aircraft destroyed. His mission was documentation for Tokyo's propaganda ministry. Henderson Field's destruction would validate the battleship bombardment strategy and demoralize American forces across the Pacific. 0658 hours. Henderson Field Tower cleared first flight for takeoff. 4 F4F Wildcats rolling down freshly repaired runway sections, accelerating through coral dust and smoke haze, rotating at 80 knots, climbing at full throttle toward the approaching Japanese reconnaissance flight. The impossibility materialized, aircraft launching from a runway that should have been closed for weeks, from an airfield that 918 14-inch shells had supposedly obliterated beyond repair. Takahashi saw the fighters climbing and experienced cognitive dissonance so profound he initially doubted his vision. Henderson Field was destroyed. His briefing had been categorical. Yet American fighters were rising through the smoke, turning toward his formation with clear hostile intent. He keyed his radio, "Henderson Field operational. Repeat, operational. American fighters engaging, withdrawing." His wing aircraft confirmed the sighting. 3 Betty bombers immediately turned north, aborting the reconnaissance mission, radioing Rabaul with reports that Tokyo would initially refuse to believe. By 0705 hours, 1 hour 20 minutes after repair operations began, Henderson Field was functionally operational. Not fully repaired, 16 craters remained partially filled, awaiting final compaction and matting. But operational, aircraft launching, recovering, refueling from emergency stocks. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion had transformed impossible into routine. 53 craters, 80 minutes. The mathematics that said weeks of repair time were required had collided with American industrial capability, tactical innovation, and sheer determination. The strategic implications cascaded immediately. Japanese bomber formations scheduled for 0800 hours, expecting to attack defenseless ground crews, instead encountered combat air patrol defending operational airfield. Tokyo Express Supply runs that had operated with impunity faced renewed air interdiction. Ground forces preparing to assault Henderson Field faced American air support that should have been neutralized. The entire Japanese operational plan, predicated on Henderson Field's destruction, collapsed within 90 minutes of sunrise. Imperial Navy headquarters received Takahashi's report at 0730 hours. Initial response was disbelief, demand for confirmation, accusations of pilot error, questions about aircraft identification. Second reconnaissance flight at 0800 hours confirmed. Henderson Field operational, American fighters airborne, runway visibly repaired. The battleship bombardment, 918 shells, largest bombardment of Pacific War, had accomplished nothing lasting. American construction capabilities exceeded Japanese strategic calculations by orders of magnitude. The impossibility had become mathematical certainty. Henderson Field couldn't be closed through conventional bombardment because American repair systems scaled faster than Japanese attack capabilities. Every night's bombardment would be repaired by dawn. Every day's air raid would crater runways that Seabees would fill within hours. The attrition mathematics favored the defender overwhelmingly. Japan couldn't sustain losses faster than America replaced them, and America couldn't lose Henderson Field faster than Seabees could repair it. 40 minutes to impossible had become the Pacific War's defining equation, the moment tactical innovation multiplied strategic advantage into operational invincibility. Lieutenant Commander Blunden's 6th Naval Construction Battalion, armed with Marston Mat and bulldozers, had defeated the Imperial Japanese Navy's battleship bombardment, not through superior firepower, but through superior thinking. We build, we fight meant building faster than the enemy could destroy. On October 14th, 1942, building won. October 14th, 1942, 0800 hours. Lieutenant Commander Takahashi Sadamu's reconnaissance report reached Imperial General Headquarters in Tokyo. Henderson Field operational despite maximum bombardment. American repair capabilities exceed all intelligence estimates. Runway cratering strategy ineffective. The message arrived stamped urgent, but triggered disbelief rather than acceptance. Staff officers demanded verification. Surely Takahashi had misidentified the airfield, confused Henderson Field with another location, experienced navigation error. At 10:30 hours, a second reconnaissance flight confirmed the impossible. Henderson Field fully operational, American fighters conducting combat air patrols, runway visibly repaired with mysterious steel matting covering crater sites. The strategic implications cascaded immediately. If battleship bombardment couldn't close Henderson Field, nothing could. The Tokyo Express supply strategy collapsed. Guadalcanal was lost. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion's 40-minute miracle on October 14th broke the back of Japanese strategy in the Solomon Islands. Within weeks, Imperial Navy commanders ceased major bombardment operations against Henderson Field. The ammunition expenditure couldn't be justified against repair capabilities that rendered damage temporary. Daily Japanese air raids continued through November, but bombing priorities shifted from runway cratering to aircraft destruction and fuel depot attacks. The Seabees simply dispersed stockpiles more widely, dug deeper storage pits, camouflaged supply dumps more effectively. Every Japanese adaptation met American counter-adaptation. The fundamental equation remained unchanged. The 6th NCB could repair damage faster than Imperial forces could inflict it. November 1942 brought the naval battle of Guadalcanal, the last major Japanese attempt to neutralize Henderson Field and land sufficient troops for ground assault. Battleships Hiei and Kirishima approached on the night of November 12th to 13th, intending to repeat the October 13th bombardment with even greater intensity. American naval forces intercepted them in Iron Bottom Sound, resulting in one of the Pacific War's most desperate surface actions. Both Japanese battleships were destroyed, Hiei by air attack after sustaining heavy damage, Kirishima sunk by USS Washington's 16-inch guns. The loss of two battleships attempting to close a single airfield represented strategic bankruptcy. Tokyo couldn't sustain capital ship losses to suppress construction battalions. The mathematics had become absurd and decisive. December 9th, 1942. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion completed its rotation, departing Guadalcanal after 100 days of continuous operations under fire. Their accomplishment record was extraordinary. Henderson Field maintained 100% operational availability despite 187 air alerts and 68 direct attacks. Fighter 1 and Fighter 2 auxiliary strips constructed and maintained, 111 buildings erected, roads, bridges, and support infrastructure completed throughout the American perimeter. The human cost was significant. Chief Machinist Mate Henry L. Thompson and others killed in action, dozens wounded, hundreds afflicted with malaria, dysentery, and tropical diseases. But Henderson Field never closed. Not for one day. Not for 1 hour beyond the minimum required for CB repairs. February 9th, 1943. The last Japanese forces evacuated Guadalcanal under cover of darkness, completing Tokyo's decision to abandon the island to American control. The campaign that began on August 7th, 1942, ended 7 months later in complete American victory, the first major Allied offensive success against Imperial Japan. Henderson Field's continuous operation throughout the campaign had proven decisive. American aircraft based there interdicted Japanese supply runs, attacked troop concentrations, provided close air support for marine ground operations, and established air superiority that Japanese forces never regained. The 6th NCB's rapid repair doctrine had transformed a single dirt airstrip into an unsinkable aircraft carrier that Imperial Japan couldn't neutralize, regardless of firepower committed. The Presidential Unit citation arrived in 1943, awarded to the 6th Naval Construction Battalion for outstanding performance of duty in action against enemy Japanese forces at Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands, from September 1st to December 9th, 1942. The citation text acknowledged what the Japanese had discovered through bitter experience. Despite almost continuous air attacks and frequent naval bombardments, this unit maintained Henderson Field and constructed Fighter I and Fighter II airstrips, working under the most hazardous conditions of combat to keep these facilities operational. The formal recognition validated what 1,002 men had proven under fire, that construction battalions weren't rear echelon support units, but combat engineers whose work directly determined strategic outcomes. Mast and mat technologies spread across the Pacific theater following the Guadalcanal validation. Every subsequent island campaign employed pierced steel planking for rapid airfield construction and repair. Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Saipan, Tinian, American Seabees laid thousands of miles of steel matting, creating airfields in days that conventional construction would have required months to complete. The Japanese never developed effective countermeasures. Bombing raids that should have closed runways for weeks instead resulted in hours-long closures. The technological and doctrinal advantage compounded across every engagement, multiplying American operational tempo while constraining Japanese response capabilities. Mast and mat sections became iconic after the war. Pacific Islanders repurposed the steel planking for bridges, building materials, and road surfaces. Pieces survive today in museums and private collections, physical artifacts of the innovation that helped win the Pacific War. Henderson Field itself transitioned through several wartime expansions. By 1943, it hosted heavy bomber squadrons, fighter wings, transport aircraft, and reconnaissance units. The muddy 3,600-foot dirt strip that Seabees desperately maintained in 1942 became a massive aviation complex with multiple runways, hard stands, hangars, and support facilities. Royal New Zealand Air Force squadrons operated from Henderson Field in 1944, conducting long-range patrols and search missions. American B-24 Liberators flew reconnaissance sorties from the field to monitor Japanese-held islands throughout the South Pacific. The airfield that had nearly fallen to Japanese bombardment in October 1942 became the launching point for offensive operations that pushed Imperial forces back toward the home islands. Post-war, Henderson Field was abandoned as military forces withdrew from Guadalcanal. The runways deteriorated, jungle reclaimed support buildings, and the steel matting gradually disappeared, scavenged, repurposed, or left to rust in tropical humidity. But the strategic location remained valuable. In 1969, the Solomon Islands government modernized the site and reopened it as Honiara International Airport, the nation's primary aviation gateway. The runways were expanded and lengthened in the late 1970s, replacing wartime surfaces with modern concrete. Today, commercial airliners land where F4F Wildcats once scrambled to intercept Japanese bombers, and passengers transit through terminals built over former Seabee camp areas. Modern Seabees still train in rapid airfield damage repair, using updated technologies that trace conceptual lineage directly to the 6th NCB's 1942 innovations. The doctrine of pre-positioned equipment, dispersed stockpiles, sector assignments, and parallel operations remains foundational to expeditionary airfield engineering. Builder First Class Tony Lent, reflecting on contemporary Seabee training exercises in 2017, captured the continuity. Theoretical knowledge will only take you so far, but actually utilizing the tools, materials, and skills required to be successful will make a world of difference when a real emergency arises. His words echoed what Lieutenant Commander Blunden's men had proven 75 years earlier, that construction under fire requires more than engineering knowledge. It demands practiced skill, coordinated teamwork, and the determination to make impossible mathematics work through sheer competence. The historical marker at Honiara International Airport memorializes Henderson Field's significance. This is one of the most famous airfields of World War II. American and Japanese land, sea and air forces battled desperately for control of the field for 6 months after U.S. Marines landed here on August 7, 1942. The plaque mentions Major Lofton Henderson, the Marine aviator for whom the field was named, and acknowledges the campaign's strategic importance. But it doesn't specifically mention the 6th Naval Construction Battalion, the Marston Mat system, or the 40-minute repairs. The heroism is understated, typical for Seabees, whose motto, "We build, we fight," implies that building is fighting, and fighting isn't necessarily visible or celebrated. Yet the legacy endures in strategic reality. Henderson Field never closed during the Guadalcanal campaign because 1,002 construction workers proved more strategically powerful than battleship bombardments. Lieutenant Commander Takahashi Sadamu's impossible dawn on October 14, 1942, watching American fighters climb from runways that should have been cratered for weeks, represented the moment tactical innovation multiplied industrial advantage into strategic certainty. The Japanese couldn't believe American Seabees repaired airstrips in 40 minutes. The 6th Naval Construction Battalion didn't need belief, they needed bulldozers, Marston Mat, and the mathematical confidence that American production capacity, properly leveraged, was unstoppable. 53 craters filled in 80 minutes. 918 battleship shells rendered tactically meaningless. The largest naval bombardment of the Pacific War defeated by 66-pound steel planks and smarter logistics. Guadalcanal secured. First Allied offensive success achieved. The Pacific War's momentum permanently reversed, all because construction workers with shovels understood something Imperial Japan never grasped in industrial warfare: the ability to absorb damage and continue operating defeats the ability to inflict damage. Time 0.5s. 40 minutes became forever. Henderson Field became legend. We build, we fight became reality. The Japanese couldn't believe it. History proved it. The impossible became routine, one Marston Mat section at a time.